not really going on a trip, you're just changing your life.
Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of Terra Incognita, the adventure podcast. It feels brilliant to finally be recording this after 18 months of putting it all together, and it's equally brilliant to be launching with Alistair Humphreys, who I've been talking to online in the way that we all do these days for a couple of years. Never really had the chance to meet up with him until a few months ago, and then recently we sat down together at Kendal Mountain Festival in November. Went and got a Chinese takeaway together, drank a little bit too much beer, and agreed to record this in his shed near London. Al is the sort of man who needs little introduction. He's something of a household name in the adventure scene. He was named National Geographic's Adventurer of the Year. He cycled around the world, he walked across India, and he busked his way across Spain playing the violin. He's also the pioneering vision behind micro-adventures. And amongst all of that, he also finds time to write books and make films. But before we hear from Al, I wanted to say a huge thank you to Firepot Food, who have supported us throughout the launch of this podcast. Firepot are a brilliant young company built on an ethos of kind of honesty and integrity. And the expedition and freeze-dried food market is a tricky one to navigate, but Firepot really sort of lead the charge when it comes to high-quality, environmentally conscious dehydrated meals. They actively avoid using palm oil, have no artificial ingredients, and they use compostable packaging. The food has really low quantities of salt and sugar and is cooked by hand in Dorset. I use Firepot personally and know that Ben Saunders, Waldo Etherington and Leo Holding all use it on expedition, and it's used by many of Britain's leading adventurers. We're really proud to be working closely with them, and if you'd like to give it a try, there's a discount code in the show notes on theadventurepodcast.co.uk. Right, over to Al.
My earliest memory of adventure will be doing the Yorkshire Three Peaks, which I did when I was 9 years old. It was a school thing. Basically, everyone in my school was sent off to go do it. Because everyone was doing it, it didn't seem weird for a 9-year-old to go walk 20 miles over rough country. And that just got me into doing outdoorsy stuff, really. But in terms of getting into adventure and expeditions, that really only happened when I was a student at university, when I started to love travel writing, so reading books of expeditions and explorers and adventurers, and that was when it sort of sowed the seeds of maybe I could actually go and do something big and different and difficult.
Okay, were you an adventurous child?
I wasn't really an adventurous child. I'd say I was just normal, really. I mean, I grew up in the Yorkshire Dales, so I had a very outdoor childhood, but it wasn't particularly adventurous. I certainly wasn't a lunatic kid. I was a bit of a wimpy, dorky kid, but I did spend a lot of time playing outside.
I read about Mike Ben Nevis and a rotisserie chicken. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the kind of earlier days or introductions to adventure?
Okay, I went to Edinburgh University, and in my first year there, a friend of mine, Mike, who grew up in Scotland, he spent quite a lot of time climbing lots of Munros. He took me and another guy, Johnny, off to go climb Ben Nevis, but in the winter. So it was the first time I'd ever had an ice axe. It's the first time I'd ever camped on snow. We put our tent up near the top, and we were I just absolutely loved it. I particularly loved it because we also bought one of those rotisserie chickens at the bottom. It's quite a posh purchase for Fort William. Rotisserie chicken, and then legged it up to the top, so it was still warm by the time we got there. So we had warm roast chicken on the top of Ben Nevis, sleeping on snow for the first time. That was a good night. And actually, university was where I really got into spending time in the hills. So I started doing 24-hour races and climbing big hills, and just starting to enjoy suffering and being miserable, and realising that I was quite good at that. I'd always felt, growing up, I'd always kind of had a bit of a chip on my shoulder. I wasn't very good at anything, really. I didn't really stand out at anything. And at university, when I discovered this sort of the world of endurance, that was something where finally I could have a more miserable time than other people.
Okay. Where was the seed sown for your first big trip, in inverted commas?
I think two things sowed the seed for my first big trip. One was between school and university. I went to I spent a year in Africa teaching in a little village school in a really rural area. So that really opened my eyes up to the world, to just thinking, wow, there's a big, exciting, wild world out of England. I want to go travel and see the world a lot more, like a lot of young people do in that sort of age. The second thing that happened was what I just said, that at university I started to get into these physical challenges. So I joined the OTC, like the Territorial Army, and I really enjoyed the physical side of that. So then those two things came together, deciding that I wanted to travel and see the world, but I also wanted to do something that was tough and challenging. And that's when I came up with the idea of starting to travel, but by bicycle rather than backpacking.
And how did that manifest itself?
Well, so my first year at uni, was that that summer I'd go cycle around Italy. That was my plan. It sounded quite exciting. And then I was in some boring maths lecture in Edinburgh University when a friend of mine, Rob, who's on the row behind me, passed a note forward saying, do you want to go cycle the Karakoram Highway in the summer? And I thought, wow, yes, yeah, I do. He was a friend of mine who was, at that stage, he was already more seasoned at adventures and expeditions. He took me on my first ever 100-mile bike ride, for example. I had this bike that I'd bought from a police auction for £12, and all the lecturers went on strike, so we decided to cycle to England for the day. So we cycled from Edinburgh to the English border. I was wearing socks on my hands, I didn't have any gloves, it was snowing, cycled all the way back. So he got me into doing these sort of stupid things, and then that first summer I went cycle from Pakistan to China, and after that I was hooked on bike trips in exciting places. The next summer I cycled with a friend from Mexico to Panama. Next summer my girlfriend got in the way, and so we had to go together to do a charity project for a few months in the Philippines. And then the summer after that I managed to get back on the bike and cycled across South America with two guys. And so this then had really sown the seeds that I knew that travelling by bike was a great way to see the world. And then I decided when I finished I wanted to go do something really big, so I decided to try to cycle right the way around the world.
So when did you leave?
So I got to the end of my time at uni and I thought, I really want to go do an adventure, but I kind of need to sort out real life and proper jobs. So I thought, the sort of sensible job that crossed my mind was to be a teacher. So I thought, right, I'll apply to be a teacher. I don't really want to, I want to go on an adventure, but okay, I'll apply. So I made a deal, I'll only apply to Oxford and Cambridge, assuming they'd say no, and then I could just go on my bike ride. But I got into Oxford, so I went and did my teacher training at Oxford. And the reason this is relevant is because roundabout, you get a teacher training, you get put in placement schools. And the school I was at, I was really enjoying it. And the head teacher, he gave me a formal job offer while I was still a student. He said, you're doing a good job, please come teach this school. And I was really chuffed by that, and I quite liked the school, and I thought, wow, I could just get this job and that's the next 40 years of my life sorted. This is great, things are going well. And I thought, oh no, this is it, this is the moment. If I don't go now, I will literally never go. So I wrote him a letter saying, dear Mr. Walker, and the fact that I remember it shows what sort of pivotal moment in my life it was. It was, thanks very much for the job offer, I'd love to teach here, it's a great school, but I've got to get out of here, I've got to hit the road and cycle around the world. And he wrote back saying, you've made the right decision, you should go do this. If you come back to teaching, let me know, you'll be a better teacher for having done this journey. So I finished there in the summer, got myself ready, and at the end of August set off to cycle around the world.
So why do you think Mr. Walker thought that was the right decision? What was it about cycling around the world that seemed like a good idea to both you and him?
Yeah, I think Mr. Walker and I probably looked at it from slightly different perspectives, but I think from his point of view, if I was a head teacher, I would want the teachers in my school to have had a variety of experiences, and I think seeing the world, being independent, seeing how different cultures operate, getting different perspectives on life is going to make you a better teacher. The reason I thought it was a good idea was just because I was too excited to not go and do it, really.
Okay, this is too big a question, and it's probably a conversation for another day, but how was the trip?
How was the trip? It was great.
What did you get up to? What went wrong? What were the highlights? What were the
thing about that trip that I think is quite a trip like that compared to, say, a normal expedition is quite an interesting thing. Because if you go, say, I don't know, climb K2, it's 2 months. You set off for 2 months, think, right, I've got to go climb this mountain. It's going to be exciting, it's going to be scary, then I'll come home. If you go cycle around the world knowing it's going to take, well, my estimate was 3 to 10 years. So knowing that, you're not really going on a trip, you're just changing your life. This is your life. So you have to do all the stuff that happens in a normal life. You have the ups and downs and highs and lows, but you're just doing it by being on the road. So in that sense, I felt that I had all of the highs and lows of normal life. I had happy times, sad times, boring times, but just on a much more extreme level than normal life. The highs were way higher, the lows were far lower, and that emotional roller coaster of it was something I'd completely unprepared for, and was a far harder aspect than just sitting on a bike, cycling a long way and going camping. Because once you've ridden your bike for a few months, you're quite good at riding a bike, so you can cycle a long way. Once you've learned how to put up a tent, then you pretty much know everything there is to know about cycling around the world. So it's my life on the road, and it was an interesting thing because I was learning about myself. It was my first big trip by myself, so there's a lot of learning going on there, but also I was passing through all these different cultures, and I was on the road when September the 11th happened, for example, and I was riding through the Middle East in the months after that. So it was a very interesting time to be experiencing the world. So yeah, it was, well, my long rambling answer suggests I was on the road for 4 years and lots of things happened.
What did you learn?
What I learned cycling around the world, I see that trip as being both the greatest blessing and greatest curse of my life, really. I think had I not done that, had I accepted Mr. Walker's job offer to be a biology teacher in Oxford, my life since would have been far simpler, calmer, and probably happier. But on the other hand, it was just such a thrilling, liberating experience. It's like opening Pandora's box. Suddenly you think, wow, the whole world is out there. There's an infinite number of possibilities of what might happen, and it's down to me to make these things happen. So it completely changed my mindset for just grabbing life by the throat and giving it a good shake. I learned that I was not nearly as tough and resilient and self-contained as I'd like to think I was during my brief nights of running around the Scottish hills. But on the other hand, I learned that I was quite able to persevere with a long, difficult project. So it made me much more confident about my capabilities and more ambitious with my goals for my life. And then what I learned, I think the main thing I learned about the world really was that it really, by and large, is a good, decent, kind place. And in the endless mayhem we see on the news from all over the world, that's a really, really powerful thing for me to constantly have in my head, that wherever these crazy things are happening or whatever crazy rulers are doing stuff, the normal people in normal places are just normal people like me. And that was it sounds a very trite thing, but it's a really, really powerful thing for just how I approached the world, really.
Yeah. And what was coming home like, in contrast?
Coming home, it was a strange thing, because I set off from my front door in order to get back to my front door. So from the moment I set off, the goal was to get back home again. So I thought about that a lot. I had to work really hard in my head to not make it the objective of the whole thing, because it would be pointless to spend 4 years in order to get to the finish line. But nonetheless, getting home was certainly a big thing that I'd been working towards. It was a complete mixture of things, really. I felt very proud. I felt I'd achieved something big and difficult for the first time in my life. It was lovely to get back and see my family and friends. I hadn't seen my family for over 4 years, so I actually felt closer to them than I'd ever felt before. And I was very happy for a while. I got home and thought, oh, it's great, I've cycled around the world, woohoo! But then you think, oh, I've cycled around the world, I'm 29, what am I going to do for the next 60 years? And that was an aspect of a big trip that I'd not given any thought to. And in the years since then, my friends who gone off to do big expeditions. I think this is a constant factor of travel and expeditions that people really don't consider, is what happens afterwards. And a lot of people are going off on big expeditions to either because they're running away from something, or they're going away in order to try to solve some problem, and then they go off and do some stupid thing, climb a mountain, go to the South Pole, cycle around the world, get home, and nothing has changed. And I think that's an aspect of travel that's a really hard thing for people to deal with. Bradley Wiggins, his Desert Island Discs, he talked about waking up the day after winning, I think it was a gold medal or the Tour de France, one of the two, just thinking, wow, well, I've done that. Nothing has changed. And I think that's an aspect that I totally underestimated. And that took me quite a few years to get over, I think.
What was it that helped you get over it?
One of the problems with doing big, exciting, thrilling, adventurous stuff is that normal life then seems really quite boring and mundane and pointless and mediocre. And it was much more exciting to be out there under the bright lights doing the thrilling, exciting stuff. And so that's what I was craving, more of that, more of that, more of that. However, the other aspect to that is that when I was cycling around the world, so 4 years of adventures in all these crazy wild places, what I was really craving was normal life and friends and family and community and stability. And I think that's where the curse comes in, because when I'm away on a trip, I realise that it's kind of stupid and the important stuff is back home. And then when I'm back home, I think, oh, this is boring. I wish I was in a desert somewhere.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, which means that, to answer your question, means I haven't answered your question. I don't think there's a solution to that, but that's why I think maybe I should have accepted Mr. Walker's job offer sometime.
Is it too late to accept Mr. Walker's job offer?
It's definitely not too late to become a teacher or to settle to some sort of normal life. And for quite a few years, I did assume that at some point the adventures would stop, then I'd just become a teacher and get on with normal life, and that would be fine. However, as time passed, I started to actually make my living out of adventures, and I've now got to the point where I make a perfectly pleasant living by doing a few trips, writing a few books, doing a few talks, and I love it. I really like it, and also it's so easy compared to like a proper job. Like I do a lot of talks in schools, and I think, wow, those guys, that is hard work, and I think I'm just too lazy now to get a proper job.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
The problem, a problem with that though, is that when your adventures become your job, you turn yourself into a golden goose. So you're only as interesting as the next egg you lay, the next adventure you do. And for many years now, I've been saying to myself, I don't want to be 60 years old and still have to go off and do something stupid just so I can come back and talk to a village hall of 50 people and sell 10 books. I really don't want to do that. Therefore, at some point, I have to change trajectory. But because I like what I'm doing right now, I never get around to making that change.
Yeah, it's a poor motivation for a trip to be able to sell books.
Yeah, and I've been to talks where elderly adventurers, people who've been heroes of mine, I just look at them and think, you're quite old, and that story's quite old, and you don't have as many people in the audience as you used to, and you're not selling many books. And I just think, I don't want to be that, but the reason that horrifies me is because that's exactly what my life will become, unless I change. But I love what I'm doing, so I don't change.
That's all that really matters though, isn't it?
What, loving right now?
No, loving what you're doing.
I would quite like to sit here now and eat cake, just shove cake in my face. I'd really like that. Is that a good thing to be doing?
Yeah, probably not. There's a little bit of forward thinking to do, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
So where do micro-adventures fit into all of this?
So micro-adventures, I spent a few years trying to do big, tough, difficult expeditions, and the main project after cycling around the world was I tried to go on a South Pole expedition with Ben Saunders, and we were working towards that 5 years, and in the end I had to pull out of the trip for domestic reasons, and I just felt that I was not going to be able to go off to big trips again. I'd become a dad, and the prospect of going to the South Pole for 4 months, doing something that's really dangerous and being away for a very long time, whilst having a young family just felt incompatible. So I started trying to think how I could get some sort of the kicks of adventure without actually going off on a big trip. And the other aspect about that time was that by now I'd got to the point where I was earning my living from adventure, so I was doing talks, writing books, and people were then starting to perceive me